Hi everyone, thanks for listening to the Botch Pit again. This is Chris, the decent storyteller, host to Idiot Players, and happy to have you listening. So, it looks like people seem to be enjoying the beginner's guide stuff, and we've already covered that, so I'm not going to waste too much time. That said, this is going to be the beginner's guide to Vampire the Requiem 2nd edition. I know I said I was going to have it up last Thursday, but, first off, as you can probably tell, I'm still getting over that cold. I'm almost there. But as I started poking through this book, and I back in 2008 when the first edition came out, needless to say I picked it up. And I did not care for it. I'm not going to lie to you. It was just overly romanticized compared to what I was used to coming from Vampire the Masquerade. And when I was doing these beginner guides, my thought was, okay, a lot of people like Vampire. So, I'll kind of just sit and crap out some of the clans and give the basics and whatever. And, I was going to pull from what I knew off the top of my head. But I decided before I did that, I would start poking at the 2nd edition book. And as I started looking through it, first off, let's make it very clear. Huge improvement, pretty much on all levels. They saw what people liked and what they didn't like, and they acted on it, and I think that's really great. Which you could see from... they were definitely even aware of it, because as you go through the book, and they have, the little paragraph headings, one of them says Requiem plus Masquerade. So they knew there were elements missing from Requiem that Masquerade had kind of mastered, and they really decided to put that together. So the differences between 1st and 2nd edition were a bit more than I expected, so that's why it's taken me an extra couple days. I decided to put it down, reread through it, pick up some stuff, figure out some of the differences, and come back to it. Because when I did Mage, I wasn't pleased with some of the 2nd edition stuff that I hadn't really gotten into too much. But I'm going to add it into the other chapters I was doing for it. So, with that said, let's get into it. Beginner's Guide to Vampire the Requiem 2nd edition. Well, love it or hate it, vampires have always kind of been the linchpin to even the old World of Darkness and the new World of Darkness. The world is full of humans, and if you were to look at per capita amount of supernaturals, there's no way vampires aren't dominating that scale. I know for a fact that certain supernaturals are exceedingly rare. Like, look at the Sin Eaters. In 1st edition, yeah, they're around, but in 2nd edition, they're supposed to be very rare for when that book comes out. But with the simple fact is they're just everywhere. They spread. They're a disease. They know it. It's not a big secret. They're literally leeches. Well, I guess figuratively. So, figuratively leeches. So, but I should have done this first, because vampires are pretty easy to understand, but the cool thing about it is, and this is why people keep coming back to Vampire, it's as deep as you'd like it to be. They're reflections of humanity, and with that allows you to play with those, those sort of ideals. You don't have to just have very basic, 30 Days of Night blood-hungry vampires. You can have the Anne Rice element. You can have that near dark element if you want it. The Lost Boys, all of that can fit into Requiem, which I really like now. And vampires exist living under two major facets of their life. You've got the Requiem, which is their night-to-night dealings with other vampires, their politics, the sires, the covenants, all of that stuff. That is the Requiem. That is how they survive their night-to-night. But more importantly is the Masquerade, which is how they exist and survive among the throngs of humanity. It's how no matter what, they have to deal with humans. They have to deal with mortals. Yeah, it's their food, but more so, you can argue it all you want, it's still their world. Right? Because vampires can only live half the time. At night. That's it. So, those are the two main aspects, the main themes of this game are really, how do they fit into their own society, and how do they navigate mortal society? That's what you get from that. And again, you can kind of make Vampire anything you want to. You can go romanticize, you can go dark, and we'll get into that because you have different clans and different covenants. Clans are the different bloodlines of vampires. Now, another key difference between, Masquerade and this, and 1st edition even, is now none of the origins to almost anything are concrete. They wanted to bring that element of mystery back. They don't want you knowing where everybody came from or what they're doing or how they came from. It's all theorems. And while you can't deny being a member of a clan, because that's your blood, that's your abilities, you can have a Nosferatu try to claim to be a Ventrue as much as he wants. But when he's got, maggots crawling out of his eye sockets. He has to keep blinking away, and that one rivulet of, mucus coming down out of his nose. You are what you are when it comes to the blood. And make no mistake, the blood is everything. For sustenance, for lineage, for title, the blood is all. That is the entire point of being a vampire. That's how you exist. You exist to feed. You exist just for the sake of existing. Because any sort of emotional trappings that you had, you're not that person anymore. You are a literal bestial shadow of whatever human you used to be. You don't have those same emotions. Yeah, making love feels pleasant, but it's not like the end-all, be-all hormonal rush that you get when you're human. It's more like it triggers memories. Like, oh, I remember that smell. That felt nice. You can never enjoy the same things again the same way. So, the clans. You have, I believe it's 5 major clans. Yeah, they did stick with that. So you have the Deva. They're the pretty much sex vampires. They're the masters of exploiting human desire. Endless pursuers of what makes them feel alive, especially at the expense of others. Given the title Serpents, they suffer the wonton curse. Well, not the Chinese food, but the wonton, I guess would be the word. And that's feed from any one mortal more than once, and they run the risk of becoming emotionally reliant on them. And their clan disciplines, now mind you, disciplines are their powers and their abilities, and I'll get to that more towards the end. Their clan disciplines are celerity, majesty, and vigor. Then you have Clan Gangrel. Now, I'll give a quick breakdown. So celerity is pretty much the discipline of super speed. Majesty is using your presence to inspire and manipulate people. And vigor is being really, really orangutan strong. You have Clan Gangrel. Primal survivors. The Gangrel are very in tune with their own beast. They're boogeymen, creatures unapologetic about the power of ferocity. They're dubbed savages, and their feral curse makes it hard to resist the beast. And why would you want to? So normally, where vampires can resist that inner monster that they all have, and mind you, you have this inner psyche, voice, force, pulling you to do the wrong self-destructive crap. It's almost like the way that wraiths used to have specters from Old World of Darkness. Gangrel are very in tune with that nature, and instead of resisting it, they ride that wave. So their disciplines are animalism, which is, you can probably tell by the name what that is. But animalism is the kind of like they're loosening the leash of that inner beast, and they use that to take dominion over animals and their abilities. They have Protean, which is, I really like Protean, I always have. The power of unbridled savagery and dominion over the earth itself. They can meld into the earth, they can grow claws, they're just, they're nuts. Then they have Resilience, which is, if this were Old World Darkness, you'd call it Fortitude, really. But it's their ability to take an inhumane amount of damage and keep crawling, even if they're just tendon and bone. You've got the Maquette, which are my personal favorite. And they're shadow vampires, the keepers and seekers of secrets. Seeing most, but rarely actually seeing themselves. Some say that they lose their identities in the shadows after a time. Appropriately dubbed that is actually their nickname, Shadows. Their curse is the Tenebrous Curse. Due to the secretness and darkness of their clan's blood, sunlight, fire, and torpor threaten them more than their kindred brethren. Their disciplines are Auspex, which is the ability to glean information through both direct means and visions. Celerity, which is vampire hyperspeed, really fun, can't go wrong with that. And then they have Obfuscate, which is their ability to really just, hide. The ability to stay hidden and be forgotten. Extremely useful for creatures of the shadow like themselves. You've got the Nosferatu. Creatures of nightmares. The Nosferatus embody horror better than any other kindred. Nickname Haunts, their curse is the Lonely Curse. You see, somehow, the grotesque thing that they would call a soul is actually physically embodied on them. Most vampires may be dark on the inside, or corrupt on the inside, but look okay on the outside. Nah, Nosferatu are gross. And sometimes they just feel really creepy, but normally there's some sort of physical, some physical just nastiness that pushes you away. And again, it doesn't have to be. It could just be a general feeling of pervasiveness, grime, slimy, nastiness, whatever. But, typically they're a little gross. Their clan, so their curse is pretty much just nobody wants to be around them because they're nasty. Long story short on that one. So, their clan stuff is Nightmare, which is fear. Yeah, that's okay. But this is a vampire's ability to cause total and absolute horror. They just scare the shit out of you. They've got Vigor, which is, vampire super strength. They wreck stuff. And then they also, if I remember correctly, they also have Animalism, which is, the ability to mess with animals. Let me double check that real quick. I just want to make sure I'm not messing that up. Because reasons. Because I don't want to be giving you guys wrong information while I'm talking to you right here. That's pretty embarrassing, considering it's a beginner's guide. Yeah, their disciplines are Nightmare, Obfuscate, and Vigor. So they cause you to experience horror. They're actually very good at hiding, just the exact same way the Mekhet are, and they have, orangutan strength as well. So that's the Nosferatu. Yeah, I actually did notes. This is actually very helpful. Usually I just kind of go off the top, or I have some, a notepad document in front of me. But I actually decided to sit down and take the time and write this all down, because if you guys are gonna take the time to listen, I want to make sure we're giving you the right information. Then you have Clan Ventru, which is the clan of winners. The Ventru are natural leaders, aptly titled lords. Their clan bane is actually the aloof curse, which means after a while they're just so used to having people listen and be obedient and winning, they just lose the ability to have any sort of empathy. People just don't matter to them. They become totally detached. People are just things. And their clan disciplines are Animalism, which is, again, we talked about that. Dominate, which we have not spoken about yet, which is a really cool one. And that is the ability to gain obedience from lesser beings just by pretty much telling them what you want them to do, or even just sometimes using body language. It's pretty nasty. And Resilience, which means they can get blasted lots of times and keep on coming. So they're fun. So those are the clans. Those are the bloodlines. Now, they have their own organizations, which are kind of like religious groups or politics or however you want to see it, that they typically throw allegiances behind. And you have 5 typical ones that most vampires belong to. And the city, each city could be run by a different covenant, or each town even, or some by multiple if they can have an agreement. So you got 5 traditional ones, which we'll go through, and then you have something called the 7, which we'll touch on after. So you have the Carthian movement, activists, revolutionaries, political activists, monsters. It's Greenpeace meets Che Guevara with fangs, all in the name of a new democratic vampire order. They are just, I don't know, they're nuts. I mean, you could have hippies all the way to terrorists with these guys. It'd be pretty brutal. You got the Circle of the Crone. Celebrants of wild vampiric nature, they revel in the pagan-like ideologies of a monstrous mother nature. Pretty much, if you were to take a druidic theory, or which is paganism, well, they all sacrifice in the name of, I don't want to say mother nature, but the dark mother. They're no joke, and they're really cool. They're fun. And eventually I'll do a recording where I actually go in depth with these groups. But for right now, being the beginners, it's just a crash course in case you're about to play over the weekend or something, or you just want to get a brush up on it. You got the Invictus. Welcome to corporate America, sustained by the blood. The Conspiracy of Silence, as they're known, are masters of the masquerade. They know how to wield power efficiently, and information like no other. They know where all the bodies are buried, or where to put them. They are, if you have, the scariest and most heavy-handed leadership roles, I assume, would be a Ventru Invictus. They would just be, I can't even imagine the ego, this would be grotesque. You got the Lancia Sanctum, the Catholic Church for the happy damned, kind of. They're thriving on a healthy fear of hell, and all that the kindred have. The Lancia Sanctum leverages that fear. They use almost that Catholic guilt mentality to keep stuff in line. They're known as the sanctified, and they're the librarians, keepers of arcane knowledge. They pass that down, work it around, and maintain that through a whole set of rituals and traditions. They are a twisted vampiric Catholic church. In fact, if I remember correctly, they were founded by Legivius, the soldier who speared, Jesus on the cross, supposedly. It's a whole thing. Then you got my personal favorite, the Ordo Dracul. These people are legit followers of Dracula. They're the mystics, arcane scientists, masters of the hidden world. They're really cool. Their primary goal is the transcendence of vampirism itself, and they really don't like God at all. The same way that, Dracula himself was really pissed off, they follow that. And if they ever had the means to transcend vampirism and walk up to heaven itself, they would kick down the door and punch God in the face. They're not happy with that dude. They consider their whole curse, just like, like Dracula, they consider their curse and the way their unlives are as a slight from God. So they try to find ways to work around it. So then you have the 7. And again, these guys aren't your typical vampiric society. They are vampires who hunt vampires. They can be very creative with their kills. Think of it as if, vampires were scared of Jason or Freddy, and these guys had a secret society where they just kind of killed at will following their own secret agenda. And it's them because when they murder people, they leave a calling card that has the Roman numerals of 7 on it, and they'll often write it on the walls, from whatever remains might have been from the vampire they took out. Fortunately for vampires, it looks like the 7 hate the Strix, which we'll cover in a second, even more than they hate the fellow kindred. Nothing past that's really known. So, that's a general breakdown of the clans, the disciplines, and their society. That's very basic and they follow this stuff. Needless to say, you can't have this sort of situation going without having rules that people need to follow. And those rules are 3 traditions. The first is the masquerade. Do not reveal your true nature to those not of the blood. Doing so forfeits you your claim to the blood. Which means, hey, if you risk our ability to eat, we're just gonna fucking take you out. Done. The second tradition is progeny, which is sire another at the peril of both yourself and your progeny. If you create a child, the weight is your own to bear. And what that means is you are responsible for your dumbass children. If they do something dumb, yeah, they're gonna get blamed for it, but so are you. It's a good time. So maybe you shouldn't be popping out little leech kitties. Just a thought. Now, the third tradition is Amaranth, which is you are forbidden from devouring the heart's blood of your kindred. If you violate this commandment, the beast calls to your own blood. So, not only does, in the old world darkness, this would be called diablerie. It's legit where you drink not just the blood, but down to the soul of another vampire. And you can technically lower what's called your generation. You can be a stronger vampire for doing it. You can take on their memories, some of their powers, all sorts of stuff. But it's cannibalism, man, and it puts stains on your soul. It's not good. It's not good. It's a good way to get real power real fast, but all of those different cultures, all those different societies, with the exception of like the 7 and whatnot, they follow these rules because they know if they don't, it's death. And it's common sense death. This isn't like Old World of Darkness where you had a list of 10 commandments or 10, traditions or whatever. Maybe it was 7. 6? I forget off the top of my head. But regardless, it's just those 3 primarily. Yeah, each individual city could definitely have additional rules by whatever, group is running it. Whatever covenant is running it, I should say. But those are the ones that almost everybody follows. With that said, the one last thing I want to touch base on here with 2nd edition, probably the biggest addition to 2nd edition is a different antagonist. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, I'm going to touch on one more thing. So, the Lancia Sanctum, Ordo Dracul, Circle of the Crone, not only do they have access to the disciplines, but those covenants actually have their own powers. They have their own, blood magic and blood sorceries. You got Kruak, Theban sorcery. It's all blood magic. It's a good time. And on top of that, the Ordo Dracul has something called Coils of the Dragon, which they can use to literally, depending on what level they are and what they could do, spit in the face of what they say vampires can and cannot do. They will just be like, hey, I'm going to walk in the sun for 10 minutes. So, again, a couple more abilities that are specific to orders are out there, and we'll cover that more in depth when I get to the mechanics or I get to the unique traits in another recording, because it's just the lore. So the antagonists that they added to 2nd edition, which is really cool. At first I was kind of I don't know, but then I read up on them. They're called the Strix. Never having been mortal, these are true creatures of horror. They hunger for life and hate the living for it. Initially shaped like an owl made of shadow, these freaks inhabit corpses to their means, their own sinister ends. However, instead of blood, they feed on the breath of the living instead of blood. They share problematic scenarios with vampires, which shares that rumor has it they have a shared history. And to kind of solidify that, they have issues with fire, sunlight, but not to the same way. It doesn't hurt them or burn them the way other creatures do, regular vampires, but instead they just can't pass it at all. It is like walking into a brick wall. And there are other specific banes to different Strix, but that's something they all share. So, actually, the thing that makes them even worse is some powerful Strix, the way that these guys work is they normally inhabit a corpse to walk around and cause trouble. They literally go to a dead body, force their way in, walk it around, and start experiencing, life again. Granted, they're in a gross, rotting shell. But the thing is, to the Strix, a vampire is the same as a corpse. They can legit hop in a vampire and just take them right the hell over. And they just exist to cause disarray for vampires. They are just agents of chaos. Once in a while, you'll find a talkative one that's actually not necessarily out to mess everything up immediately, but that's their general angle. And some even more powerful Strix, normally before they inhabit the bodies, they're in the shape of kind of like an owl, but the really powerful ones can actually take their own shadow form and grow a beak and talons and exist even just as their own Strix. So that is a very quick breakdown of Vampire the Requiem's lore. That covers the basic states of the cities. That covers the clans, bloodlines, disciplines, what they do, and the new antagonists and the traditions. So that's a really good jump off. And again, this is part 1 of a 4-part series that each game is going to have. I'm going to do all the lore for the games first. But I don't want people to be stuck sitting here for 40 minutes listening to me give a whole breakdown at once, or God knows how much longer. So it's going to be 4 different chapters. The beginner's guide stuff is going to be the lore. If you're not going to be running a game where you need these people statted out and you need to roll for them, then this will be all you need, which is really neat. Or if, you just want to have someone kind of casually bump into one and have an idea of what some of the powers do. So, thank you for listening. Please leave any input you have. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share. Please help us get out there. We appreciate it. I really enjoy doing this and bringing this education to people. So, next one's going to be, and I'm actually going to start it tonight. I was trying to be really subtle about it, but fuck that, I don't want to. I'm going to start digging into Promethean because I never really have, and it's unique to the Chronicles of Darkness. And that, I like Changeling more, I think. There's other games I may like more, but Promethean is still really cool, and it's very unique, and I look forward to discussing that with you next week, or maybe even before that. I may get it a couple days early, just so that way you guys can't give me any crap for not getting it up when I said I would. Thank you, Chris with the Botch Pit. Have a good night. Bye.